Listen to the brutal and entirely uncompromising truth about the absolute biggest anchor currently dragging you down to the bottom of the ocean. It is not the economy, it is not your lack of resources, and it's absolutely not your genetics. The massive, terrifying weight destroying your future is the pathetic weak crowd of people you currently surround yourself with. Society has actively brainwashed you into believing that you need a massive social circle, that you need to be constantly connected, and that you must desperately seek the validation of the herd. Let me tear this toxic, catastrophic illusion apart right now. The crowd is a highly contagious disease designed to completely dilute your focus and systematically destroy your potential. Every single time you compromise your brutal daily discipline to go hang out with average people, every time you engage in their pathetic, meaningless gossip, and every time you seek their cheap, fragile approval, you are actively feeding your own empire to the wolves. You are voluntarily wrapping massive, heavy iron chains around your own neck. Average people are absolutely terrified of extreme dedication. When they see you violently pulling away from the herd to execute your massive goals, they will instantly try to drag you back down to their pathetic level of mediocrity. They will call you obsessed, they will call you crazy, and they will desperately try to convince you that you are making a mistake. They do not do this because they actually care about you. They do this because your terrifying, relentless execution aggressively exposes their own massive failures and laziness. You must execute a violent mental override right now and completely sever the chains. You must look at your phone, look at your social calendar, and brutally execute a mass deletion of every single distraction. That does not directly contribute to the construction of your empire. This is not a request. This is your absolute non-negotiable directive. You cannot build a monolithic, terrifying empire while simultaneously entertaining clowns. If you want undeniable ultimate power, you must be entirely willing to walk away from everyone. You must gladly trade the cheap, synthetic warmth of the crowd for the brutal, freezing cold reality of the battlefield. Stop desperately trying to save people who are actively choosing to sink. Every single meaningless social event you attend is a direct act of treason against your own massive potential. You are actively choosing to be a weak peasant in an empire of your own making. The Matrix thrives on your constant availability. It desperately wants you deeply entangled in the pathetic drama of other people's miserable lives. If you do not violently, forcefully extract yourself from this toxic web, you will die completely, average and utterly forgotten. Your massive legacy will be nothing. Let them drown in their own mediocrity. Cut the cord, shut your mouth, and walk into the darkness. When you finally execute the massive purge and walk away from the weak, distracting crowd, you will immediately step into the brutal, terrifying reality of the void. This is the exact moment where the vast majority of weak men completely break and go crying back to the herd. The void is absolute, total isolation. It is the deafening, crushing silence that completely surrounds you when there's absolutely nobody left to applaud you, nobody to distract you, and nobody to validate your existence. You will wake up in the pitch black dark and your brain will violently scream at you to reconnect, to check your phone, to seek out the cheap dopamine of social interaction. This is the ultimate test of your psychological operating system. The pain of loneliness is entirely real, but you must fundamentally reconstruct how you process that pain. The weak man views isolation as a massive punishment, as a prison sentence that he must desperately escape. The Shadow Emperor views absolute isolation as the ultimate strategic superpower. In the void, there is absolutely nowhere to hide from yourself. Your massive insecurities, your pathetic excuses, and your deep laziness will be completely exposed under the blinding, harsh light of your own solitary conscience. You must willingly step into this terrifying psychological pressure cooker and allow the heat to completely burn away your weak past identity. You must learn to derive a sick, glorious, dark pleasure from the absolute silence, while the pathetic masses are out violently destroying their dopamine receptors in crowded, noisy rooms, desperately trying to forget their miserable lives. You are sitting in the freezing cold dark, meticulously confronting your massive demons. You are actively utilizing the intense pressure of isolation to completely forge a new impenetrable armor around your mind. If you can survive the brutal, crushing weight of the void without running back to the comforting lies of society, you will unlock a terrifying level of invincibility. It absolutely no longer matters if people like you. It no longer matters if they understand you, because you have successfully killed the pathetic internal mechanism that required their approval in the first place. Embrace the void. Let the absolute silence completely deafen the weak voice inside your head. Force your physical body and your mind to endure the maximum limits of solitary confinement until you completely forget what it feels like to need another human being. Your brain is desperately addicted to the massive comfort of the herd, and the violent withdrawal symptoms will try to break your spirit. Do not negotiate with this pathetic weakness. You must ruthlessly execute the protocol of total sensory deprivation from the opinions of others. When you stare into the black abyss of your own mind, you will finally see the absolute truth of your massive existence. The pain you feel is weakness leaving your system. Destroy the massive weakness of dependency right now. Now that you have successfully entered the void and killed your pathetic need for social validation, you must actively convert this absolute isolation into a massive, terrifying weapon of mass execution. Isolation without brutal, relentless work is just depression, but isolation combined with extreme obsessive, hyper-focused execution is the exact formula for creating a shadow empire that cannot be tracked, stopped, or contained. Welcome to the Silent Forge. This is where the actual brutal, bloody work gets done while the entire world is completely fast asleep. You must completely disconnect your execution from the toxic concept of audience. You are no longer performing. You are no longer announcing your massive moves on social media, and you are absolutely no longer seeking a pat on the back for doing what you were simply supposed to do. You must become a massive, silent force of nature. You wake up in the dark. You strike the heavy iron anvil. You completely exhaust your physical and mental capacities, and you go back to sleep without uttering a single word to the outside world. This requires a terrifying level of cold mechanical discipline. The weak man is absolutely terrified of doing the work if nobody is watching him. He desperately needs the massive applause to fuel his pathetic, fragile ego. You must operate on the exact opposite spectrum. You must execute your most brutal, massive, world-altering work in absolute total secrecy. When you build in the dark, you entirely remove the enemy's ability to attack your massive plans, because they have absolutely no idea what you are constructing. You render yourself entirely invisible to their radar. You ask absolutely nothing from the world. You nod politely at their foolishness, and you retreat back into your massive, fortified cave to continue the violent, repetitive grind. This is the art of pushing the colossal boulder up the massive mountain in the dead of night. It is deeply boring. It is incredibly painful, and it requires you to violently focus on the one single micro action directly in front of you. You place the massive heavy brick perfectly. You completely forget about it, and you place the next brick. Your absolute worst solitary day of mechanical execution must be entirely superior to their absolute best day of socially motivated ambition. Become a terrifying ghost in the machine. Operate purely on the relentless, extreme friction of daily execution. You do not need massive bursts of inspiration. You need cold, calculated, systematic destruction of your daily tasks. The weak man waits for the stars to perfectly align before he takes a single massive step. The Shadow Emperor simply forces the universe to bend to his iron will through the sheer volume of his daily execution. Every swing of the hammer is a massive investment in your permanent escape from the Matrix. You are building an impenetrable fortress of dark competence that no social chaos can ever destroy. You are becoming a terrifying weapon. Grind in absolute silence. The ultimate massive glorious payoff of spending 6 brutal months in absolute dark. Isolation is the terrifying emergence of the monolith. When you finally decide to step out of the shadows and re-enter the world, you will no longer be the weak, pathetic, emotional creature that walked into the void. You have completely altered your fundamental chemistry through massive, undeniable, silent execution. You have successfully weaponized loneliness and turned it into an impenetrable fortress of dark, stoic power. The weak people who previously mocked you, the people who desperately tried to drag you down, will look at your massive, terrifying output, and they will be in a state of absolute total shock. They will frantically scramble to understand how you achieved such massive, undeniable success, but they will fail because they cannot comprehend the massive, brutal, solitary price that you willingly paid in the dark. This is the absolute ultimate revenge against a society that demands your constant attention and weakness. You do not defeat the crowd by arguing with them, you defeat the crowd by completely and utterly outgrowing them in the absolute. Dark until your massive shadow entirely eclipses their existence. You have successfully proven that true absolute power is a cold, silent, heavy force of nature that simply moves forward regardless of who is watching. You have evolved from a reactive, dependent puppet into a terrifying, untouchable architect of your own massive destiny. The weak man constantly announces his massive plans to the world and completely fails to execute, while the dangerous man silently loads his heavy weapon in the dark and completely conquers the territory without making a single sound. You must strictly carry this dark, cold philosophy of the monolith with you for the rest of your existence. Whenever you feel the massive, pathetic urge to share your goals, to seek validation, or to rejoin the toxic noise of the herd, you must immediately recognize it as a dangerous trap. Suppress it instantly and retreat back to the silent forge. You are the absolute shadow empire. You do not announce, you do not boast, and you absolutely do not rely on the crowd. You move in absolute terrifying silence. You observe everything and you execute with cold mechanical precision. Now close your mouth, cut the massive, dead weight from your life lower, your heavy head, and get back to the brutal, solitary work. Let the weak masses drown in their noise. The clock is violently ticking, and your ultimate absolute victory demands your cold-focused isolation. There is absolutely no glory in returning to the herd. You are now a completely different species of apex predator. The colossal gap between your execution and their dreaming is unbridgeable. Let them stare in terrified silence at the massive empire you built from pain. You conquered the absolute hardest territory in the universe, which is your own weak mind. Do not ever look back. Execute in the dark until I win.